Here. Okay. All right. So why don't we start with the roll this morning and get going under the agenda. So John DeWolf is present.
Here.
Richard Swezak from
Here.
Colorado, I suppose. DeAndrea here. Bob Doan.
Here.
Good morning, Bob. Al Regina.
Morning.
Here.
Sue Mattern.
Here.
Good morning, Susan. Brian Thompson. And we're just waiting for Bob Don.
I think he's on.
There he is, down at the bottom. Good morning, Bob. You're muted. Regardless, he's here. So, if I may, I would like to introduce Trip Whalen, who represents the United Kingdom Consulate. Is that correct, Trip?
That is correct, Tony. So I'm here calling you all from Boston, here at the British Consulate. As you can tell by my accent, I am not from the United Kingdom. I'm from New England. Unfortunately, don't have the pretty voice that our diplomats have, but am working here with the consulate to engage with a lot of the boards across New England. So we've recently joined up on some Vermont's board meetings, some Massachusetts, Rhode Island's, and I'm going up to Augusta next week to meet with the Maine board. And essentially what we're doing is we've been speaking with our policy folks down in DC, and as some of you may or may not know, the NCEES, or NCEES, yeah, that's right, and the engineering body in the UK have come together to form a mutual recognition agreement for qualifications. What I'm here to do is help educate, just flag it on your radar. We've been working with a lot of the boards in New England, and their kind of singular pain point has been a lack of a talent pipeline or a desire for a more robust talent pipeline. And this will kind of augment that and allow for engineers from the UK to come and work here in the great state of Connecticut, or likewise, if you all want to have a trip over to the UK for a couple of years or a secondment, you can head over there and be registered and licensed there to work. There are some specific rule changes that some boards have found they need to undergo to fully implement and operationalize this, and we've been kind of coordinating with the NCEES to make sure those folks are getting the support they need, whether that's drafting model language or just seeing if there are existing pathways that would suffice to allow for these engineers from the UK to get licensed. I am happy to circulate some materials. I've sent over some to Tony that kind of provide an overview of the qualification that exists in the UK and how that mirrors to the qualification here under NCEES. Equally, kind of the main next step, if this is something you all are interested in, is for us to provide more context in a policy lens if that's of interest to you, and B, we've had a lot of folks recently sign on to the letter of intent, which more or less just says, hey, this is something we'd like to pursue. How do we go about actually operationalizing? And again, that's when we can bring in NCEES to provide that, kind of bespoke tailoring. If it's necessary, it's not necessary for every board to make a statutory or regulatory change to start accepting engineers or start sending engineers abroad. But they can help with that investigation, and if it is necessary, provide model language. But that is kind of my elevator pitch. So first off, any questions on that? I know some boards had a lot of engagement around the NCEES meeting this summer. I know others were less present, so happy to provide additional context to any of the board here who would need it.
One of the things that you and I discussed, Trip, very briefly was, and I think you mentioned it, that the states who are looking to sign on, so to speak, and I don't think we would have any objection. As long as NCEES has set the parameters of what is equivalent, then it makes it a lot easier for the states to understand and cooperate, recognize, whatever the word might be. So how many of the states have indicated that they have a problem doing that without changes in their legislation or enabling statutes,
So that varies. I mean, I know we talked briefly about how some states have a very active regulatory and statutory change process, and others have a less active one. Um, with some of the states in New England, I can tell you that Rhode Island and Vermont have needed to make tweaks to their changes, but they've got more of a consistent process where they go through the legislator. There have also been a number of states, I think North Carolina, uh, North Carolina is one, and I believe Maine, where it doesn't look like they will need any statutory or regulatory changes, so they can just go ahead and start accepting engineers. The qualifications have already been drawn up, and I can send through what that agreement looks like. And there's certainly parity. This started. It took about a year for NCEES and the Council of Engineers in the UK to draft out this framework. But we're very much at the point where everyone I've spoken to has said, this is a high fidelity agreement. There's no worries or need for assurances in terms of the quality of folks going back and forth. It's more just making sure that we can actually operationalize. And I know we talked briefly about some of the pathways that you all have for licensure in Connecticut. And it looks as though that it may not require any changes on your part, which is great. And again, happy to have that conversation with the policy wonks that we have down in DC and with NCEES to make sure that we're not missing anything. But it should be a rather easy process for you all based upon what we discussed last or 2 weeks ago, Tony.
Right. So my impression at the time was that if NCEES tells the boards that they've developed an equivalency or satisfaction with that equivalency as to the education and experience and examination that makes it equivalent to what we have been requiring, then we would have no problem accepting that individual. That's the way I looked at it. Similarly, when NCEES evaluates a curriculum from India, they tell us that's equivalent, we accept it. And I don't see how or why we wouldn't be able to do that here. Does anybody have an opinion about that?
I have a question. In the UK, as I understand it, all you need to do to be licensed as a professional engineer is graduate from an undergraduate program. Is that correct?
So for licensure, and let me just pull up the exact, so I'm giving you the exact years and whatnot. There is an examination requirement, an education requirement, and an experience requirement. So let me just scroll down here. It's essentially been laddered up, so it looks very similar to the NCEES framework for how we do licensure in the States. The only difference being that the examination is oral. So that's kind of the main difference that folks have questions about. But this is not just, oh, you have an engineering degree and then you're licensed. It's more robust than that.
So there's only one examination, and it's an oral examination.
So outside of the normal examination requirements that would come with the education, that would be an oral one for licensure.
And what about experience?
So let me pull this up, and I'm happy to send this through because this is as you can imagine, a very lengthy document we have here. But the experience qualification is, I believe, the exact same time frame that NCEES puts forward. Let me just.
Trip, you sent the 171-page document, and I sent it off to everybody on the board. I know I haven't read it, but the bottom line is that the NCEES is not suggesting that the UK engineer is required to take the NCEES exams. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I just found a experience bit. So just like NCEES, it's 7 years of qualifying experience, including 2 years in responsible charge of significant engineering work. So that's literally the exact same, so far as I can tell, or so far as I know. Between
7 years is 3 years more than we require.
There you go.
We've had applicants from the UK that we have not approved because they haven't been examined. We're sticking with the model law, which means two exams, and the applicants from the UK don't have it. We have not accepted an oral exam in place of those two exams.
Right, so that was the question I just raised, is that how does NCWS, what do you call, accept that as acceptable? How did they come to that determination? You see?
Yeah, and so the NCWS folks will have a more technical response to this. But the way I've had it phrased, it's very much like defending your dissertation. So even though it's a different format, it still requires the same depth and breadth of knowledge. And it's, I mean, Britain is in many ways still very quaint. And kind of the oral exam is more traditional, I suppose, than some of the paper exams that we do here. And so to your point, John, I think the route here would be to essentially just create that equivalency between the oral exam and the NCEES exam, if you will. And that's the only material change that would happen. And with that kind of assent to the idea by signing the letter of intent, you would trust an NCEES's assessment that the Engineering Council of the United Kingdom's assessment is as at what's the right word, as as qualifying as the United States one. That would be kind of the action that comes out of signing a letter of intent.
What is the oral exam? Can you give an example, or how long does it last, or who does it?
So it's one that is brokered or given by the engineering the engineering board in the UK. So most folks who do it, they do a meeting where they assess competencies across everyone's experience, map their actual work to the competencies that they discussed, and then the oral exam, which again is kind of like a thesis defense. During that interview, the applicant orally connects all the different parts of their experience and connects it to each of the different competencies that the engineering board develops. So on average, they say that most applicants take about 10 years to meet all the competencies in the UK. So not dissimilar to, how long it may take some of the engineers in the US to get to that point.
But I mean, how long is the oral exam?
So I don't know exactly how long it is. I've heard, again, like a thesis defense, it could be a couple hours, 3 hours, something like that.
Is it a series of exams or just one exam in terms of?
So they call it an oral interview. And again, that's just kind of semantics, but it's just kind of that one singular event where you go in and you apply after building up all the other qualifications so they can map your experience against the competencies that they test for.
So they're more or less looking at the experience record and assessing, input or what do we call it? The verification of employment. The documentation of the employers saying this was accomplished and this is what he's done, so that you're reviewing it more on the basis of what others have said. I mean, it's hard to imagine that you're going to do a structural exam orally and satisfy the criteria. So it has to be based on experience and the testimony of others, it would seem to me, under that circumstance.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it would be quite amazing if they were doing actual structural engineering questions on the exam, but it would be akin to having someone looking through your resume and then having another sheet next to them saying, here are the competencies for licensure. Can you tell me how in this role, in this position, this mapped out to XYZ competency, and going back and forth like that throughout the whole list. So you're essentially...
Yeah. Sure. When you say the other states are signing on, what does that mean to us? Is it that we have we can be in opposition to it, or is it a done deal? The NCEES and the UK have come to an agreement that they're going to accept applicants, or they want us to accept all applicants from the UK on a one-to-one basis based on their assessment.
Yeah.
Accepting the word of the UK, in other words. That's what it's coming down to.
So the NCEES and the UK Engineering Council have agreed that there's an equivalency here. The difficulty of both paths is equal. the competencies required in both passes equal, et cetera, et cetera. And they have already agreed upon that. What they are now asking is they're going to individual boards and saying, is this a program that you guys, or policy that you guys would like to have assented to on your board? Is this something that you would like to, participate in, as opposed to, is this something that you've comments on or would like to refute? At this point, NCEES and the UK Engineering Council have already established that there is kind of evil level between the two paths.
Right, so if we rely on NCEES for the examinations, and if those applicants who pass the two examinations are deemed qualified for licensure as a reciprocity throughout the country, then based on our acceptance of their basis of examination, we are being asked to accept their evaluation of the examination in the UK. So if we accept the way the exams are done here, we're being told that when somebody comes from the UK, that they've already been deemed equivalent as though they took those two exams.
Right. So that would be kind of the main point of the unique aspect of signing up to the letter of intent. It would be acknowledging that point that NCEES has described and defended this equivalency, and that you as a state board understand that and support it, in the sense that you would also like to be able to participate and have engineers, whether it's coming from the UK or you guys sending engineers over, but to access that pathway that NCEES has opened up with the UK Engineering Council.
I think that, obviously, the level of competency has to be equivalent in terms of, otherwise you'd be seeing a lot of, failures or, mishaps occurring, in different locations. So you would have to believe that, engineers have a certain level of competency and are capable of designing projects of, substantial quality, so that nothing really happens. So, I think that, whether you take a test, orally or, or a written test, ultimately, the real test is that your projects are successful and that you don't run into a significant amount of problems during the construction phase of whatever you're designing.
Right, Richard, that's what I was driving at when Tripp says, their experience requirements are 7 years, and then your track record has been established and your testimony of other professionals that you work with, and then, as you just said, your track record of completed projects probably speaks for itself. I mean, it's not like the United States is the only place where they're designing 1,000-foot tall buildings.
Correct. In terms of everybody has their codes and everybody has their, method of design and their materials that they're most comfortable utilizing. And it's just a matter of, getting familiar with, the environment that you're going to be doing your designs in. So in that sense, as long as the person's competent, whether he takes a written exam or an oral exam, he's going to be a competent engineer. And obviously, by doing a written exam, it sort of, gives you a more direct indication of what his capabilities are, versus an oral exam where somebody could be very eloquent and be able to, fool a lot of people most of the time. But ultimately, the testament is in, the kind of designs that you present and whether they're economical and are, part of, engineering principles that are normally utilized. So in that sense, I don't have a problem, as long as NCEES does vet, the equivalency and gives us an idea that, they are equivalent. And I would have to believe that an engineer in almost any country, as long as they're really an engineer, is very capable of doing engineering work.
Right. So I think what we're being asked to do is, go ahead, John.
I'm going to disagree. We have a lot of applicants who have many years of experience who can't pass the exams, and we do not approve them for licensure in Connecticut. Why should we allow another country's applicants not have to do it the same thing? I mean, the exams are important. We do not waive either exam. And
John,
so and here has to take both exams. Why should we let somebody get around that with a simple oral exam? And I will, having been a professor, I'll tell you, oral exams are so much different than having to actually solve problems.
John, I'd like to offer a potential thought, and I don't know if this is true, and Trip, maybe you can confirm. But one of the things that we have here in the United States that's significantly different than they have in the UK, I believe, is an enormously large number of different schools, all of which have their own standards and capabilities of teaching adequately. And obviously we try to address that with the accreditation boards. But I would imagine, and I may be wrong, but I would imagine that there's a far fewer number of engineering schools in the UK, and it's possible that they're better, you know, what do you call it? Well, not prepared, but they're just better. They're more aligned together, and therefore, in the U.S., we have our fundamentals of engineering and professional, principles and practice of engineering, which kind of like equalizes the disparities between the multitudes of colleges that teach engineering here in the U.S. And maybe it's just not as necessary in a region where it's much smaller geographically, much smaller population wise, and a much smaller number of colleges that they could all meet in one room and discuss whether they're doing things the same. That's just a thought. I may be wrong. I don't know if that's the case, but maybe that is a reason why they have it set up on a model of their examinations are through their universities. And if you pass the universities, you've essentially passed the examination that our NCES examinations basically ensure candidates are able to do problems, and then they do 7 years, and then they do an oral exam. That's just a thought.
Ryan, remember that all programs in the U.S. that provide a 4-year engineering program have to be accredited. So they are strictly, and believe me, the accreditation process is strict. It is very intensive in order to have your engineering program approved to give accredited program. So I would say any of our programs should be as strong as any program in the UK that are accredited.
Yeah, and John, to that point, all the programs that would be feeding into this in the UK have already been established as equivalents to the US programs under the Washington Accord. So they're the same quality and standard of program, and there certainly are fewer schools. I'm not sure if that is a causation or correlation in relation to why the exam is oral, but there certainly are fewer programs than there are in the States.
So, Trip, let me ask you this: the way this mutual recognition agreement, form that was presented to us, we're expecting that an individual from UK applies through NCEES, and NCEES will evaluate that application and decide whether or not they're entitled to an international PE. Is that what we're expecting?
Yeah, more or less. And there's no need to make a decision today. I mean, obviously, that I would advise everyone to take a look through the long document, maybe not all 130 odd pages. But, if you take a look through that, I think you'll get a real understanding and feel for how this is a competency. Like, there are no corners being cut here. I understand at first glance it may feel that way. But every board I've spoken to after the first or second call we've had and discussed this, it's not been a question of, okay, is this really equivalent? It's turned into a discussion of, okay, how do we actually operationalize? So I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse here and say, okay, well, what do we do in terms of getting UK folks, licensed in Connecticut quite yet? But the idea would be that it's a frictionless process as opposed to having to go through essentially duplicate duplicate efforts in the UK and US to get a license in Connecticut. It would just be, okay, you've gotten your license in the UK, all good. You can now practice in Connecticut once you give your information and verify that. And likewise, again, if any of you fancy a trip over to London, you can go and just submit your documentation, and the UK licensing board will accept it. Again, they're very granular details in the document I sent over, and it's very long. But I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns you all have with it. I do just very much want to stress that this is not a case of trying to make it quote unquote easier. It's a case of trying to make sure that on both sides of the pond, where frankly engineers are needed in both locales or in certain locales on each side, that we can get good qualified engineers to those places without having to waste the time and money and effort that act as kind of barriers for people to move across those markets. It's not as though the UK is looking to export a bunch of engineers who are not great at their job. These are engineers who are great at their job. They just want to be able to, access different talent pools, and likewise providing that opportunity to folks in Connecticut. One other thing I'll add is when speaking to boards in this region, particularly, there's been a great desire for folks to look at this as kind of the model for the eventual kind of ascension of other agreements that would include folks like Canada, and getting the Canadians in this kind of frictionless process to support kind of the ebbs and flows of needs as we go through big kind of infrastructure and engineering cycles. So something to think about down the line, but definitely don't want to derail this whole board meeting on this, and do kind of hope that you all have the time to look through this in detail, and I'm happy to answer any questions either here right now or further down the line if you all get the chance to look through it.
I think that's what we have to do, is just give us all a chance to read
and that's totally fine.
the document and get a little more feedback. It's interesting that it's interesting to me that it's deemed necessary, I guess, by NCWS. NCWS, as Trip and I discussed a week ago, whatever it was, that NCWS is a business. They're an examiner. They set up examinations and they sell those, if you will, to other jurisdictions. So they go to Japan and set up a testing site. They go to India and set up a testing site to accommodate those individuals from foreign countries taking our exams and making that equivalent effort. But that's what's missing here. And the question is, why? And John's question is, why shouldn't they take the exam if they're qualified? Would make it so much easier for everyone. So it's curious as to why NCWS takes this approach when it seems on the surface to be significantly different from the tangible aspects that we consider. And the exam is set up, as we've always said, it's set up to prove minimum competency in the profession.
Yeah, and I think my kind of closing retort to that would be, much like the NCWS, the UK's Council of Engineers is very, it's kind of a storied institution with a lot of respect. To Ryan and Richard's point, the universities there do have a long history of providing engineering degrees and are very good at it, and the buildings are not falling down all the time in the UK. It's very much these two institutions hold themselves to a very high standard and look at themselves in a very certain light. So they want to look eye to eye, as opposed to the UK Council of Engineering probably does not want to have to look up to their big brothers in the US. And likewise, the US doesn't want to have to look up to their I guess, older, but shorter brother in the UK. So there's kind of that dichotomy that's going on here. So two storied institutions, both have stringent qualifications, but let's just agree upon that as opposed to fighting out who does it better. That's kind of the long and short of it, Tony.
My opinion is that, typically engineers want to be, good at what they do. And, the majority of engineers want to benefit the society they're involved in. That, you know, we've all come across, you know, the engineer who has marginal skills and doesn't necessarily understand the theory of what they're doing, and but but sort of things get separated as you develop, you know, your experience, and as people start recognizing what your limitations are. But, you know, for the most part, I would have to believe that, you know, the majority of the engineers are competent in what they do, and that, you know, there should be some reciprocity, and not necessarily have to, you know, punish, you know, the good engineers, you know, because of, you know, the minority or those few engineers who might have marginal skills. And we've all seen, you know, applications come across our desk where, you know, somebody takes a test 5 times before they pass, you know, fundamentals and then the principles too. And you wonder, you know, geez, you know, how good of an engineer are they really? And, you know, would you really, you know, want to have them doing your design for you? But ultimately, you know, once they do to pass the tests, regardless of how many times they took the test, you know, they still have, you know, the qualifications to be an engineer. So in that vein, you know, we're never going to get rid of, you know, the marginal engineers. And not, like you said, not everybody graduates at the top of their class. You know, there has to be some people who are, you know, there's the bell curve type of thing. So, but, you know, I think that, you know, if we can sort of come to some kind of resolution, and NCAAS does create, you know, some kind of structured, you know, review that leads us, you know, gives us confidence that, you know, they have reviewed it, and that, you know, these are competent engineers, you know, I wouldn't have a problem with the long, you know, term, you know, usage of this.
Right. When you read this notice or mutual recognition agreement, it's asking for the boards to support NCAAS continuing with the ratification of the agreement. If 48 jurisdictions say yes, we're outnumbered regardless, is what it comes down to. Because NCAAS is set up to foster reciprocity between our own jurisdictions, and their process of evaluation, we rely on that. And now what they're saying is NCAAS is going to be the one to determine whether or not the UK engineer is equivalent to the US engineer. And once that's done, we would be expected to follow it.
Well, I don't necessarily know that that's true. I mean, this board has, you know, I mean, just in the short time that I've been a member of it, I've seen we've had multiple discussions about where we disagree with NCES's
Correct.
assessment.
Right. We're members of NCAAS because they provide the examination, which provides the baseline for us to establish equivalency between the applicants. In this case, go ahead, John.
I believe very strongly that the second exam in particular eliminates many from the profession who are unqualified. The second exam has a large portion that stresses using the codes that are applicable in the United States to allow people to get registered in the United States. And I'm speaking as a structural engineer, without having to take that second exam, I think is very scary. As they say, the exam does eliminate the weak engineer from being licensed. I know of a particular case. I probably could come up with others from former students, but nevertheless, without that second exam, we have no way of knowing whether the person is truly able to use the codes that are standard in the United States to do adequate structural design.
Right.
And to allow some applicants to be excused from that and not others is just fundamentally unfair.
Right. Therefore, what I was saying was if 48 jurisdictions out of 50 decide that they want to ratify this agreement, it doesn't obligate us to conform. That's all. This thing says, are you going to support this if it happens? And we don't have to say yes. And I agree with you, John. You know, where's the actual basis for it? If we have a simple exam, that NCAAS prepares that establishes minimum competency for the standards and specifications that are here in the US. Why should that not be the basis for acceptance? So we don't have to do this today, and we can look a little more into the document that we distributed and then come back and discuss it at the next meeting and decide whether or not we want to sign our name. That's all. But I think you've got a good point in it, and we should understand it. Like I said, if you go and you look at moving the exam to Japan or moving the exam to India, it's done. They take it, they pass it, we're done. We can send a whole box full of exams to UK and have them take the exam. If you want to practice in the US, is there anything particular about the structural exam? Yes, otherwise, why do we have it? Okay. Yep, I don't know if we got all the answers, but we're going to have to, look at the document and come up with a few more, and then we can decide at our, perhaps at our next meeting as to whether or not we're willing and able to support it at this point as presented.
Yeah, of course, and I just want to make first of all to confirm what Tony said. Very much, this is not something that is just happening. The whole point of the letter of intent is if this is something you would like to pursue. I am also not, I don't win anything if you guys sign or not. I just really want to know what you guys are thinking, and so that I can get you guys the right answers. Should you have specific questions. And the one other thing I'll add is that when we come down to these specific points, like you're talking about, John, that's why some locales have considered building in specific, how are they described here? Regional or jurisdictional requirements specific to the jurisdiction of your board. So if you say, hey, all of this is great, but we still want you to take XYZ part of the exam, that is something other boards are considering. And I just want to put that out there for you all so that okay, well, we don't want to go whole hog into this. We would like to have this plus XYZ part of the exam. Then that's also something that folks have talked about. That pathway looks a little different. It's a little more complicated, and that would be a separate conversation, but just want to put that out there as well. But again, easy to be reached. Tony has my details, so feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer questions by email or do a separate call if that's easier.
The only other thing I want to add, and maybe in John's defense, is that a competent engineer, who practices good engineering can easily pass these tests. They're not that hard. If you know what you're doing, you can, just take a pencil and a calculator and go in there and do the designs. It's just, a series of, making sure that you understand the principles of engineering, because basically that's all they're testing. They're not testing, spelling or anything.
We go to the other countries, we provide them the applications, they take the the exam, they take the exam, and we're done. Yeah, but I don't understand why it's not the same here, that's all.
Right. If a person really wants to come to the United States, they can spend an afternoon, take the exam, pass it, and then it's all done. So maybe, I'm looking at it, too simplistically, but, a good engineer is not going to have a problem passing these tests. Believe me, they're not that hard.
NCAAS, why is it different here for the UK? That's all. So let's ask that question and see what we can find out and understand why why did it need to be different here for the UK? That's all. All right. I appreciate it, Trip. I think we got some homework to do ourselves, and then we have another discussion. And we've got good input from several comments here.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me. And again, easy to be reached. And I can send through some more information should you all want it. And ideally on the next board meeting, if you guys want, take another crack at this discussion wise, I can bring some very intense policy people if you guys are ready for that. But they're much more into the weeds than I am. So it could be either a very exciting conversation for you or a very boring one, depending on how you look at it.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you, Trip.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think we've got some, a couple of, well, first we're going to take care of Janita, who I know has presented a new summary of complaints in their resolution. So if you would like to go through that, Janita, would be appreciated.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the reporting time frame of September 1st, 2024 to October 31st of 2024, the department did not receive any new complaints, and it did close 4 existing ones. The first one noted at the top, that was in the legal department, and that was closed, so you would need to contact Cynthia Fernandez, because I believe she is the attorney that had that file and closed it. Then the next 3 we received an anonymous complaint. The investigator investigated it. There was no additional need for any further action. There was no evidence of any violation, so that file was closed. The next file was a workmanship consumer complaint, and the investigator mediated it, and the consumer was happy because the lady received the corrected survey from the land surveyor. And then in the final one, it was a dispute of facts. The investigator closed it because the complainant needs to take the land surveyor to court. It's a dispute of facts. The surveyor is saying one thing, the other complainant is saying a different thing. And as you all know, the department does not provide land surveying or land surveyors to the complainants. For some reason, they think that when they file a complaint, we're going to come to the board and you're going to provide us with a land surveyor that we're going to take out to their property and redo a survey and rule in their favor. The surveyors are licensed. The consumers were notified that where there is one, there is either not an issue or it's a dispute of facts. It is a civil matter. The department does not provide land surveying, land surveying
We don't provide
assistance.
the service. We're not redoing the survey. We're
Yes,
it's not our job, right? Okay.
yes. So, do you or any of the board members have any questions?
No. Always
Okay.
interesting to see the basis for them, and I would wonder why we'd waste any time on an anonymous complaint. Other than that,
Well, you, sir, as some of my inspectors and investigators and myself feel, but anybody can file a complaint. What we do is we send
You
a
have to look
copy
at
to we send a copy of the complaint with a letter to the respondent, and they go, "What is this?" I'm like, "Please just say you didn't do that. It's not you. Your license, give us a copy of the license, and then we can close it and say it's a non-issue." So
okay.
with that, I'm going to thank you all for your time and wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Janita.
No.
All right. The next thing I would like to do to accommodate our normal process of moving through the LS items early in the agenda, I would like to do that and move to page 6 on our agenda for 3 applicants for Class 6 exam, which were Harris, Lang, and Niski.
I just have one comment about Harris. I mean, overall, I think all 3 of them should be approved, but I did note that on Harris's last page of his application, he or he or she, I can't, he didn't correctly tabulate the second column of experience. It looked like there was just a cut and paste error. I don't think it should preclude him from being approved, in my opinion. But I did note that it was, technically speaking, he had like 118 years of experience, and that was clearly an issue. It was an error, but I don't think it should preclude him from being licensed.
So is there a motion to approve Harris, Lang, and Niski for Class 6 exam credit Part 1?
Hey, Tony, excuse me. Should we have Susan
Sworn in.
sworn
Yeah.
in? Thank you.
No, we didn't do
So
that
that
yet.
she can vote. Yep.
Yeah. I didn't know if she was acting in her official capacity today, but if she is
Sorry,
voting.
Paul, I
let's do
overlooked you. I said that one in the beginning. We were going to do that, and I forgot. So
All
may we
good.
proceed with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very quick. So Susan Mattern, I'd ask you to raise your right hand. And do you, Susan Mattern, solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that you will faithfully discharge, according to law, your duties as a member of the State Board of Examiners for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors to the best of your abilities, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
I will.
Thank you. So with that, the oath is administered and you are a member of the State Board of Examiners for Engineers and Land Surveyors. Congratulations.
Welcome again, Susan.
Thank you very
Right.
much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
Well, Cascade.
So therefore, is there a motion
Get to
to
work.
approve?
I'll move that we approve the 3 names.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second
Thank you, Susan. All those in favor of the motion to approve Harris, Lang, and Niski for Class 6 exam, credit Part 1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And there were 2 applicants for Class 8 exam, Neer and Salgat.
I'll move that we approve both.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hearing none. Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion carries. Then we do have some issues on our minutes for the last session. I did not see anything particularly interesting or incorrect. We had made note of the fact that Susan wasn't sworn in yet, so that's been taken care of. And I did not see anything else. There were a couple of deferrals, which we will take care of today. And that was it. So is there a motion to either amend or accept the minutes as presented for October 8th?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes for October 8th as presented, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carried.
I'll
Oh.
abstain in terms of I was not there, so.
You abstained, okay? Thank you. Richard?
I should abstain as well.
That's correct, Susan. Thank you. So we had 2 abstentions. Richard Prezak and Susan Mattern for the minutes. And we did have some more correspondence that affects everybody, so we should go through those if you don't mind. The first one I have down as item AA1, which was a question that's been asked before, but if we have a professional signing a full set, if you will, of a design plan that involves multiple disciplines, and those disciplines, those separate disciplines are subcontractors, if you will, to the original or the primary engineer, then one seal is sufficient. At that point, you have to understand or agree that the other disciplines have an agreement with the primary engineer. So I think simply stated, if engineer B is under this as a sub-designer contract to the primary, one seal is appropriate. We've decided that before. If there's no disagreement, I think that's correct. In this case, Morgan is responsible for all of those other disciplines in his design. If not, then each individual has to sign their own drawings. It's that simple. So you can assemble a set of professionals and have one firm responsible for the design. Do we agree on that?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, in this example, the electrical engineer is the principal engineer, the project engineer. He has a mechanical engineer as part of his design. He has a signed and sealed document from the mechanical engineer. At the end of the day, the electrical engineer is the primary responsible for the design.
I think what he's asking though is if he can sign the mechanical drawings.
The answer is no.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, the answer is no on that, yeah. But, yeah, okay, I guess I misunderstood what you were saying.
Well, I understood this to say that he's the electrical engineer on the project and he's registered in Connecticut. Can I sign on the other guy's drawings? The answer is no.
Yeah, no, yeah, okay, you're right, yes.
So
I agree with that.
you can sign as the principal engineer for the project. The other engineers are under contract to the principal engineer. It's not uncommon, right?
But the point, I think what this guy's getting at is his mechanical engineer must not be licensed in Connecticut. And so he's wanting to sign. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna have to get the mechanical drawings signed by a Connecticut licensed mechanical engineer.
Right, but he has a mechanical engineer on staff. He isn't licensed. So the mechanical engineer is doing the plumbing and the HVAC under his firm's license. Then, of course, he's signing for the project. He doesn't have to have a mechanical engineer. But you're right, taken literally, no, you can't sign another engineer's work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think though, but I'm sorry, I don't want to be nitpicky on this, but who's like, how is he supervising the mechanical engineering if unless he's competent in mechanical engineering, unless he's got the experience and can back it up. I mean, but if he's not, if he's electrical and he doesn't know mechanical well enough to be able to sign it, then I don't think he should be signing that drawing.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Even if the guy works for him.
Right, and if he doesn't have a license, then the electrical engineer isn't qualified to review his work.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah, how can he supervise it, you know?
Right.
So a professional engineer works to his capabilities. So he's not going to sign the design of a mechanical engineer doing plumbing and HVAC because he's violating so many things, ethics included. So the fact is, on the surface, the answer to this question is no, you can't sign the design of another professional engineer. That's it. But if you want to take responsibility for the work done by one of your employees, you can sign the design. You're ultimately responsible for the design that you put your name to.
I agree. The only differentiation is that, normally, it's an engineer that's multidisciplined would indicate that, I'm disciplined in all these, facets of engineering versus if you only say that I'm an electrical engineer, then obviously you're not a mechanical engineer, so you shouldn't be signing for a mechanical engineer. But if in their job description or their firm description, they say, we're mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, plumbing engineers, and they have all these, sanitary engineers, then obviously, the engineer in charge, regardless of what his major discipline is, could sign for the other engineers, like Tony says, in terms of if it's one integral company, then you only need one engineer to sign for the entire company. But if your company is just doing electrical engineering and then all of a sudden somebody else comes in and says, well, we need somebody to sign a mechanical engineering drawing, but he's not part of your company, then, I again agree with the general consensus.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Correct.
If you're signing for different disciplines, I would think that each of the separate disciplines would have to be licensed in Connecticut.
Agreed.
So the mechanical engineer that is under the electrical engineer would have had to have had a license in Connecticut. Part of the whole ethics deal is you don't sign for stuff that is out of your area. So that if there's a mechanical engineer under the electrical engineer, I would think the requirement would be that mechanical engineer needed to be licensed in Connecticut.
Correct. So the simple answer here is that let's see.
I don't think there's a simple answer.
Yeah, I think it needs to be written out.
The professional engineer who prepares the mechanical design must
Be licensed in Connecticut.
must be licensed in Connecticut and sign for his design.
Right.
Each engineer
or the electrical engineer, if Stacy, if she's competent, if she is.
No, the electrical engineer, if he doesn't have a competency in that area, he can't sign for another area.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, it may be that he's an electrical engineer, but he's also competent in the mechanical, and in that case, he could,
Right.
But yeah, I think it needs to be written out kind of in plain language, like that.
But I don't think you can sign for another area if you're not competent.
Yeah.
And that's part of, that's part of the ethics that's behind the licensing.
Yeah.
If you,
Right,
if
Tony,
if you're the head of the firm and you're signing for a bunch of disciplines within the firm, that's okay if each of those sub-disciplines have engineers that are licensed in Connecticut to practice it.
Right. Yeah, for example, if I do site plans all day long, but if I have the structural working on, like if I had a company and there was a guy in my company that wasn't licensed, but he did structural engineering, I couldn't sign that. I'm not competent on structural engineering. He would have to get licensed, and I can't even like review it, like I wouldn't sign it at all, because I wouldn't know if it'd fall down or not. So
right, ethically you can't sign for
right.
it.
I think the same thing applies here.
Tony, if you're looking for something in a nutshell, someone stated each separate discipline must be licensed. That's all.
Right,
correct. That's it.
That's
That's a
it.
good
I
way.
just wrote that out. I'm going to send it to
I
Jane.
didn't come up with it. Someone else said it. But I wrote it down.
See, the difficulty here in this particular question is we don't have discipline-specific licenses in Connecticut. But as mentioned, any aspect of this can be answered the same way. If you're not qualified, you can't sign it, all right? This is not a case where the engineer is working for the same firm. He's asking me you're asking the principal engineer, the electrical engineer, to sign the mechanical drawings. The answer is no. All right, I'll sketch something. We'll send it around quickly. The simple answer is each engineer must be licensed in Connecticut, must sign for the design he or she prepares. That's the simple answer. You cannot sign for work that you're not expert, that you did not prepare. All right.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That's a good.
Susan, you may be the one now to, if there's no further discussion, I'll send something around just briefly. We can edit it together like we've done in the past and send it, ask Jane to send it out as a simple answer. No, use common sense. You can't sign for something you didn't design. All right. You know more about this Three Rivers
Yes.
education certificate. So give us a little bit of background and see what it means to us.
Okay, so Kevin Franklin invited me to the Environmental Engineering Technology Industrial Advisory Committee meeting that they had for Three Rivers College. And so they now have a certificate program, which is has Geomatics 1, Geomatics 2, which Kevin Franklin teaches, and then rigorous technical courses in soils, water resources, fundamental measurements, Long Island Sound ecology, and others. The basic question that they're asking is whether or not, if someone completes this certificate program, whether or not that can be considered part of their experience when they apply for the LS exam, because they would like to be able to, advertise, quote unquote, that is a reason, one of the reasons you would come and take this program, because you can apply that towards your experience. And I think to an extent that's done already. I think it was done in my case, as a graduate of Paul Smith's College. I was not in the survey program, I was in the forestry program, but I believe my experience there was applied to my time. And I only had 2 surveys there. But there were other related courses that were certainly helpful in what I've done for my career. So anyway, that's in a nutshell the discussion that we had about that new program. And so your thoughts on whether or not that can, the certificate program could be.
Right. Susan, I think you said that you wanted to apply the completion of these courses as dedicated toward your experience. Is that what you meant? Because that would be totally contrary to everything else we try to do, which says you can't count your experience while you're an undergraduate or taking courses. So I don't see how they would relate. Certainly it would be considered in your education.
Right, so there's no,
cover it.
There's currently no time that can be applied for courses that you take from college or university.
We don't do it in the engineering, and it's
Okay.
always after the degree. So your experience on the surveying side is a little bit different, right? We're asking people to give us your experience, in the field, in research, in practice. But if you've taken extra courses to make it possible for you to pass the exam, then that's part of your education. So the education isn't dedicated toward experience.
Well, it looks like that's what he's asking, not for experience. He's in the final paragraph on his letter. He says, if our associate's degree qualifies for credit as approved education, it would be wonderful to advise current and future students accordingly. And I think, yes, absolutely, it could be considered qualifying for education. And I don't think that I think that is within the current framework of how the rules are. I don't even think we need to make any changes. It would certainly count as education. Now, would it count as a 4-year degree? Obviously not. It would still be a 2-year degree, but it would absolutely count as education and should be touted as such.
I would agree with that. So what would they expect the board to do? I mean, I think Ryan put it very well, take as many courses as you can to become more proficient in your profession. If you are seeking a surveying license, the more education you have, the easier it would be to do that. I don't know that we have an actual classification for this program, do we? No. How do you, well, I don't know how to answer the question.
If they're wanting it to count towards education, I mean, towards experience, and then I agree that it shouldn't, because that's not fair to all the other programs that have, but certainly it can apply towards education as a 2-year degree and qualify people to get licensed under that, the track that incorporates, 2-year degrees, which I'd have to look up exactly what that is, but and I think that it would obviously be looked on favorably by this board. I mean, I think, I would, if I saw somebody come through for that program, I'd be very happy to see that. I don't think it would. I think it would certainly boost their resume, if you will, or their application, to have it on there. I don't know that it decreases any time requirements, though.
So if an applicant comes in and he's successfully completed the 2-year environmental engineering technology program, and it includes these courses, you would say those are appropriate to be considered in your land surveying education. I don't know if it works up, if that's what they're asking.
I mean, it kind of seems like that's what he's asking, and I think that it does.
I'm reading the last paragraph. To the extent possible, may we humbly ask for any feedback which would help improve our program. So the question is they're trying to establish a program, trying to make it the best they can. They're looking for feedback from us and how they can improve the program, what they should do.
It does exist at this point. It's just a matter of, I think, additionally, if they could get information there. But I think the question was asking was whether or not the schooling could be considered experience, and the answer is no.
Yeah. I don't see that question in his letter.
Well, he does. He says he wants to know if these courses, he says, students can demonstrate understanding focused on skills which are highly relevant to us as land surveyors at a lower coursework threshold than a 2-year degree. So, that if one of our criteria is you have a 2-year degree, you need this much experience before you can take a section of the exam, then is this enough? The answer probably is no until you change your regulations, and we're not about to do that.
But that's not what his letter says. Right after that, it says, at this time, my goal in following up with you is to hopefully get a better understanding of where our program stands relative to the education requirements in Connecticut for professional licensing. And then later on down in the last paragraph, it says, if our associate's degree qualifies for credit as approved education, it would be wonderful to, but I very clearly see he's asking whether or not it counts towards approved education, not experience. And he might have verbally asked for experience, but in the letter, he's asking about education, and it clearly does, and 100% does. And I would recommend people go after this course. I think that they should go and tell students this is something that applies towards the education experience or the education requirement in Connecticut towards licensure. But it doesn't apply to experience, but that doesn't seem to be the question asked in the letter anyway.
Okay. Excuse me, I'll follow through on this a little bit more, because I believe that was part of the question, and then I can forward it to you if I find it actually in a written document as opposed to verbally.
So
yeah, I'm not trying to diminish the question. What I'm reading doesn't ask that. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, no, I'm not insulted.
I think what we have to do is, if you're looking at that, we have to look at what our criteria for education toward the licensure and what their overall curriculum includes. You know, what do they ultimately have then in the 2-year program?
Well, he did say he'd be happy to share syllabi, lab instructions, course descriptions. I mean, maybe we could get a copy of all that and read through it, you know?
Like I said, so if you want to follow up, Susan, on that aspect, let's see what the course is. Environmental Engineering Technology Program and Land Surveying and GIS Technician Certificate. It's a lot of words, but what does that course entail? And can we then say, yeah, that fits what we expect to have seen in when we wrote up years and years ago, our education requirements for land surveying? Why don't we start with that, Susan? See if you can get the program description and see what else we can get out of it.
I will. Thank you. I have that. I will forward it to you later.
Okay. And we could discuss it again next month. I don't know that we're in a position to tell you what courses you have to add to your curriculum to make it acceptable, because I don't know that we've ever done that in those qualifications. We have to go back and look at what it is that we require.
Tony, I think this is just the kind of the tip of the iceberg, if you will, because we have to revamp our land surveying requirements. It's archaic the way it's written, and this brings to light the changing of the land surveying career, essentially, and how it's changed since we were licensed many years ago.
Right. And that could actually just move us to the next item, which would be AA4, which is there a support information for the development of professional surveyor PS mapping science non-boundary exam. I joked at the cows meeting the other day that Susan was going to work on a committee of one to revamp our application, because I think it's totally, as somebody just said, archaic. You just said that, Bob Doan, archaic and out of date in what we actually do. So, and I had said, talking to a couple of people there, that one of the most important people in the office is not necessarily the guy who's outside looking for a corner point. He's one of them, but he's not the only one. And the individual who can interpret the deeds is a very important person. And I think that this kind of recognition of that individual, bringing more people into the profession, would help us meet our demand. So having some professional recognition and status is important.
Well, the definition of land surveying in the state statutes is all inclusive. That definition doesn't allow for the breaking out of individual segments of what constitutes land surveying and saying, we're going to have a license that only pertains to items 7 through 17, but items 1 through 6 are not included in this license. There's no provision in that statute to do that. So, in my opinion, what they're trying to establish there is a degree of licensure that would run counter to what state statutes say.
Well, the other difficulty we have, I believe, is that since we're not a discipline specific in engineering, how are we going to be discipline specific in land surveying? So beyond the fact that we may not be able to implement it, I think that there should be a starting point of trying to find another way to recognize, if not through licensure, other aspects of surveying. That's all. And I believe personally that the people in the office are as important, equally as important as those who are gathering the data.
Well, they serve functions that speak to the elements that are involved in the definition of land surveying. So yes, but that does not mean that they qualify to be licensed by the definition of land surveying. So there's a duality there that would have to be addressed somehow to even consider doing this, that there is no provision to do it in the law.
I personally, and I think this is important. I think that it's what you're going to end up with if they end up developing these examinations and we end up pursuing licensure for boundary, licensure for geodetic, licensure for topographic, you're going to end up with people who are going to have to get 8 licenses to do what right now they do with 1 license. Because they're going to say, oh, you're not a licensed hydrographic surveyor. I go out and do bathymetric surveys once a week. And now I have to go get a license to be a hydrographic surveyor. That doesn't make any sense. I'm licensed to do all these things. And the other thing is, what about the people who say, well, I'm not going to worry about boundary. I'm just going to get licensed in geodetic through mapping, which is GIS, which shouldn't even be a license. And then people are going to hire them, expecting them to get a boundary survey. They're not going to be like, well, I don't do boundary. I'm not licensed to do boundary, but I know enough about it. Hint, hint, wink, wink, and they'll say, okay, well, now my boundary's good. And they haven't done any research. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to properly retrace a survey or close a traverse or these days, make sure that their GPS is correctly tied to an accurate base station.
Right.
So I disagree with this whole thing.
What we're saying is we can't do it. And I would agree with you. So our response to item number 3 would be a no.
Yes, it would be a no.
Okay, so it's on the back page, but the answer is no. Done. So can we have a motion to
I make a motion
respond
to
on item number 3 as a no?
Did you make that motion, Ryan?
Yeah, I make that motion.
I will second it if you made the motion.
All those in favor of the motion to respond to item AA4 with a no on item number 3, and Jane, you can send that in.
All
I
in
think
favor?
that's all you have to do is formally submit it with a no.
Aye.
All those in favor of the motion to sign as a no on item 3, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very nice. Carries.
So I
Thank-
don't have to answer any of the other questions?
No, you don't have to answer any of the others. We're just not interested.
Oh, no.
Do we want to say why? Any comments?
I think Brian summarized it, effectively. We would have too many options that makes it impossible to administer. Something to that effect? Or just make sure.
I would say actually that, so maybe we should answer number 2. I mean, in our which of the following surveying areas of practice are included? Well, it's obviously boundary, geodetic, topographic, photogrammetry, hydrographic, construction, staking. So it's all of them except for the last 2. We don't include drainage design or GIS.
Correct.
In our definition, but the other ones we do. They're all kind of included.
So we check off all the
Drainage
last-
design is the sole responsibility of PEs in this state.
In number 4, you don't
I
have to
think the
answer because
response could include a citation to the state statute that has the definition of land surveying and say, here are the items that are included in the practice of land surveying in Connecticut. And just leave it at that. Because Ryan is correct. We don't have provisions for doing drainage design. Some states do, but we don't.
You could reference the statute.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Thank you, Sue.
Do you want it? I have it.
you can include that aspect of the definition of surveying in, if you want to add it to the back of the response. But you're going to fill in item number 1, Connecticut. You're going to check off everything but drainage design and mapping. And number 3, we're going to say no.
Yeah.
Okay,
I make a motion to modify as we just discussed.
Second.
all those in favor of the modification, say aye.
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 Which means that we'll just include the definition of surveying from our state statute and regulations, okay? That was good. Item number AA2 was information on procedures for examinations coming up in the future from NCEES and what you can bring in the way of calculators. Item AA3 is really I thought I was reading the same one, but it wasn't. Do we need two different seals for documents pertaining to professional engineering legal documents in Connecticut? We are not doing surveying. Do we need a separate stamp with our engineer's name on it? The answer is no. If you're licensed to practice as a corporation, that's your seal. Somebody has to be individually licensed. So the answer, if acting as a corporation, the corporation needs to be registered in Connecticut. That would be the first response. Do you agree? The second one is, otherwise, or in addition to, the employee who's signing the work must be individually licensed in Connecticut, and he can sign for the work, but the corporation is responsible ultimately.
Yeah, but they don't need to have a PE stamp with the firm's name. That's the question. They don't need that. They can just, the engineer who's licensed can just put it on there.
But if Corporation X is licensed in Connecticut, Jimmy G has to have a seal on the drawing produced by Corporation X. But it doesn't say Corporation X and have Jimmy G's name under it. That's not the case. So very seldom do you put your corporate seal on your drawing.
That's what I'm saying. The question is, do they need a PE stamp with their firm's name as well as PE's name? And the answer is no.
No.
They just need the PE's name.
Correct. We need a signature and the stamp or seal of that individual responsible for the design, covered by the corporate umbrella.
Agreed.
That's correct.
So in simple words, does our firm need a PE stamp with our firm's name as well as one with our professional engineers? You don't need a seal on your drawings with your firm's name on it.
Yeah.
So the answer is no to the inquiry. So I would think that we would respond. The board considered your question. You don't need a PE stamp with your firm's name on it. However, the individual responsible for the design must affix his seal to the design.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Again, it's taking it as a simple firm. X is registered. Jimmy G is the responsible engineer. He signs his name and affixes his seal. So the individual must have a seal on the design. All right, is there a motion to respond to the simple question, do you need a stamp with your firm's name on it? The answer is no.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Jane, I'll offer a couple of words to that, but we can't just say no. But I think you have to say the corporation has to be registered. The employee must have a seal, and it must be affixed to the design. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
All those in favor of that wording for Jane, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Is that okay, Jane?
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, so I think we did all of our correspondence, and that enables us to complete the surveying and the aspects and move on to our regular agenda. I don't think I had any.
Tony, we have a couple of more surveying.
We do, I missed them.
Yeah, under,
Oh,
I
yeah,
have a reinstatement. I'm not sure what page it's on. Oh, yeah,
Seven, reinstatement.
page 7.
Yep. Reinstatement of Douglas Carver, reviewed by Bob Doan.
I make a motion to reinstate him. It's only been lapsed since January of this year.
So second to the motion to
I'll
reinstate
second.
Douglas Carver.
Second,
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of the motion to reinstate Douglas Carver, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. But did I miss anything else? I'm sorry if I did.
That's all I have.
Yeah, I think we got AA2, we did AA3, AA4. Okay. I think that's it for that. So we can move on to our regular agenda, and the surveyors, if you are inclined to go back to work, thank you. And if not,
thank you.
we'll go on. All right. Okay, we took care of correspondence, and we got Susan sworn in. And the next group of applications was reconsideration of Class 1 exam credit Part 1. John DeWolf reviewed Shannon Geary and Sarah Reed.
Okay, both of them we asked them to have their supervisor on their endorser section. They have now done that, and so I move approval of both Geary and Reed.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second,
Thank you, Richard. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve Class 1 exam credit Part 1 for Shannon Geary and Sarah Reed, say aye. Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
I have a
Aye.
question.
Yes, sir.
Jane, on that list, you, with these two, you also had Brian Williams. And his experience record was not clear, and he resubmitted with the experience record corrected. Should I add Brian Williams here?
He's actually on the supplemental.
Oh, okay, I'll wait for them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. The next one was a reconsideration of Class 4 license. The first one was Thomas Daniels. The question at the time was whether or not the technology degree was accredited. It was, as well, beyond the required experience following that degree. So my recommendation for Thomas Daniels is to approve. So I make a motion to approve Thomas Daniels for Class 4 reciprocity. He's currently licensed in Maine. He has a good engineering background and a BS that qualifies. So that's my motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion to approve Thomas Daniels for reciprocity, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. The second one was Jennifer Hammer. And at that time, we voted to delay pending a clarification of experience following the degree. Since that time, she's proven that she has a master's from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, but she also has 4 years of experience following the initial technology degree in 20, which has been accredited. And therefore, my motion is to approve Jennifer Hammer for reciprocity as a model law engineer with the qualifying experience. So is there a second to the motion to approve Jennifer Hammer?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of the motion to approve Jennifer Hammer, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I think we got enough. Did we get anybody else saying aye?
I had an eye. I was-
Okay, we got them all. Okay.
I jumped the boat.
All right. All those in favor say aye. I think we did that. Jennifer Hammer and Thomas Daniel. So both approved. Okay. When I'm writing down initials, I'm having a little bit of a problem because I got too many D's. I got Bob Don, Bob Doan, so that's squared away now. So that concludes page 2 of our regular agenda, which brings us to page 3 of our regular agenda, which is initially D2, which is a list of candidates who passed the exams between September and October. Majority civil, one environmental, one naval. So it's just a notice that they were approved. Passed the exam. John DeWolf reviewed the next applicant for class 1 exam, both parts. Emmanuel Garcia Kenny, reviewed by John DeWolf.
I move approval. He's passed both parts.
I'll
Is there a
second.
Was that Ryan?
Yeah,
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion to approve Emmanuel Garcia Kenny, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, my motion carries. John DeWolf reviewed the next group of applicants for Class 1 Credit Part 1. Andrews through Walsh, and Andrews through Walsh on page 3.
Okay, quick question. Is Western New England University accredited, Jane?
I believe so, but I'll double check. Do you know what the degree is in?
What I could do, I will move approval of all applicants from Andrews to Walsh, subject with Crane's approval, subject to fact that his degree is accredited.
Okay, is there a second to the motion to approve Andrews through Walsh, subject to verification that Western New England is accredited? Nathaniel Crane, say aye. Oh, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. John DeWolf reviewed the next applicant, Francisco Sanchez Dominici, for Class 1 exam and credit parts 1 and 2. In other words, approve Class 1 license.
Okay, he's worked under 3 people and none of them have endorsed his application. So I would recommend that he get an endorsement from one of the people he's worked under.
Okay,
I'll second that.
so all those in favor of the motion to table a decision on Francisco Sanchez Dominici until he provides some endorsements to verify his work experience. Is that correct?
Yes.
All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. John DeWolf reviewed the next applicant for Class 2 exam, take both parts, Kyle Lundquist.
I will move approval of all applicants from Abbas to Brown, with the exception of Kevin Beck.
Okay, hold on one second. Let's see. I was trying to get through that next, the one above it though, John. The first one was Kyle Lundquist for Class 2 exam.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got that. Yeah, I recommend approval of Kyle
Okay.
Lindquist.
Yeah.
Lindquist.
Is there a
I'll
second? Was it Al? Thank you, Al.
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve Kyle Lundquist for Class 2 exam, both parts, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And then we have, John also reviewed Joseph Usury for Class 2 exam, credit part 1.
May I ask why this is Class 2? He has a Central Connecticut State University degree.
Is it a technology degree?
Oh, is that it? Okay. Well, I will definitely, nevertheless, yeah, I guess it is. But I will move approval because he has 13 years or something of experience.
Good. Very good. Okay. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion to approve Joseph Usury with a CCSU degree in technology and ample experience, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And the next group, John, there was Abbas through Brown.
Okay, I will move approval of Abbas through Brown with the exception of Kevin Beck.
Okay,
Second.
thank you, John, Robert. All those in favor of the motion to approve Abbas through Barber and Bisogno through Brown on page 4 for class 4 reciprocity. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. So,
Okay,
Mr.
Kevin Beck has a BS in engineering science from the University of Louisville in '94 and an MS in business. His degree is not accredited. And I'm a little bit unsure how to handle this one. Should we ask him to have it evaluated?
I'm going to have a similar question, John, on one that I reviewed, and I'm going to recommend an evaluation. So I would think we would get it evaluated.
Okay, I
And
moved.
If I may just pipe in also, when it got on my list also, John, and I had the same thing going across highlighted on the same thing because of that. So I would agree. So at this point, we seem to have a consensus from two different observation points. So what's the motion then to table?
Table until his degree is evaluated.
For NCAAS evaluation. So that's the motion by John. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to table the decision on Kevin Beck for class 4 reciprocity pending an evaluation of the education curriculum by NCAAS. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right, now moving on. I gotta change pages here for a minute because I'm taking care of Rob Lewandowski, excuse me. Okay, so Rob Lewandowski reviewed the applications for Karuba through Degani Najani on page 4 and Delzer through Hidalgo Reyes on page 5 of our regular agenda. Rob noted a couple of things just for the record. Well, I'll deal with them separately. The only one that I will take out of this discussion right now is Karuba. All right, that's the first one on the list. Roy Karuba, we want to table that one for a moment. All the other applicants, Rob Lewandowski, reviewed carefully and recommends approval. There was one individual, Degani. He was not model law due to the foreign degree. It was evaluated and found to be very good. And he also has a PhD from New Mexico. So that was good. So that was it. So anyway, he recommends approval of Klebeck through Frank on page 4 of the regular agenda.
I'll make
And
that motion, Tony.
I just gotta change.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I meant went too fast. And then Deltzer through Hidalgo Reyes on page 5. So he recommends approval of all except Roy Karuba. So Bob recommends approval. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Richard.
Oh, Al.
Was it-
Give it to Al.
All those in favor of the motion to approve all but Karuba, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Now, the interesting part of his evaluation was that Roy Karuba had, let me grab it. Here we go. Okay, so Rob's summary was that he wants to table it. He'd like a little more information. He wants the board to review it. The individual is not a model law engineer, although he seems to have the correct credentials and experiences, but his disciplinary record seems to be that which catches up to him. So while they date back to 2018, they seem to have been related to, if you read a summary that was provided, they seem to be fairly minor in that they involved payment of $50 fines here and there throughout those. And each time, he wasn't prohibited from practice. They didn't take away a license, but they seemed to be recurring in whether or not they were significant. But the last one was a citation where he ended up paying a fine of $11,950. And the way we find out about that is that there was a letter to whom it may concern. So Rob had a good point. He said, look, we need a little bit more information on the resolution of all these complaints. So he just asked that it be tabled and respond to the applicant. The unsigned letter to whom it may concern should be verified. You know, who wrote this? You know, that concerns Rob, and I agree with him. I don't think there's any harm in asking him to give us a little more explanation on some of these disciplinary actions. And did he prepare the line to whom, the letter to whom it may concern? And if so, he should sign it. So my motion in respect to what Rob has presented is that we should table the decision on Roy Karuba and request an elaboration on the disciplinary actions and verification of who was the author of the letter just addressed to whom it may concern. So that's my motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, John. So the motion is to defer decision on Roy Karuba pending explanation on all of the disciplinary action and to confirm or establish the author of the letter undated to whom it may concern, which was attached to his application. So let me just write this down. All those in favor of the motion to defer pending additional information for Roy Karuba, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. So if we can elaborate on that, Jen. If you need some help, I will add, but we want an elaboration of the complaints that were listed and verification of who wrote the letter, to whom it may concern, entitled to whom it may concern, and if known, we should have a signature on it. Okay?
Sounds good, thank you.
If you have any questions, let me know. So that takes care of all Rob Lewandowski's main agenda. So that leaves us to Richard Swezak reviewed Johannesson through Mealy on page 5 of our regular agenda.
Yes, in terms of, I guess I'm gonna approve, all the applications except Edmund Martin, but we can have a discussion about Edmund Martin in terms of he's non-model law. And it's something similar where, he says in his synopsis is, have you ever been disciplined? And he says, yes, a firm I worked for in the past did not have a licensed engineer as part of ownership. An investigation was done and I was interviewed multiple times. It is my understanding that I was not found guilty of any wrongdoing. Then I became a minority owner of that firm. And there's another statement that said, I was interviewed numerous times by this New York State investigator and was told I did nothing wrong. My license was never suspended and there are disciplinary actions against me. However, the investigation shows up in my NCAAS check. My license remains in good standing to this day. In terms of he is licensed in, originally licensed in New York. And, in New York evaluation has the fact that there was some investigation done. But, I don't know that he says he's never been fined anything or, and no formal complaint was made against him. So in that vein, I guess, I don't have a problem. I tried to figure out which firm he was working for that he became a minority owner, but it never shows up in his references or his, his work experience. So I can't figure it out. But anyways, I'm not sure that would preclude us from accepting his application unless somebody has a different opinion.
I think of the disciplinary actions, typically if they're resolved, they should suffice. In the prior application, it was like an open-ended issue. Was there a second page to it? But if you feel that the disciplinary action on Martin was resolved, then
yeah, I think he moved on in terms of, he mentioned the fact that he was a minority owner of a company, but I think that ultimately he did move on. So in that sense, I'll make a motion that we accept the entire list of applicants in terms of, I did have, an applicant from Cuba, Ed Hidalgo Reese, and his education was deemed, equivalent. I did have another application from India, Mahada. I'm not going to even try to say the first name. And, that was, he was shy a couple of hours in science and a few hours in general education, but, I find that, that's acceptable too.
Right.
So
is there a second motion to approve Johannesson through Mealy?
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And then we have the group reviewed by Bob Doan, Moody through Rexford on page 5 of our regular agenda.
Okay, I'll start with Cassandra Moody. Has a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and a Master's in Environmental Engineering from University of Houston. I would like her degree evaluated. I make a motion to table it, subject to an NCEES evaluation.
Why are we evaluating it if she doesn't have a four-year engineering degree?
John, the master's degree has 47 credits of engineering courses.
Now, is that 47 semester credits or quarter credits? My guess is it's quarter credits, which means that it would be about 30, and I'm not sure, but I think if I recall correctly, that they're on the quarter system.
Okay, hold on just a sec. The undergraduate degree is from Texas A&M, but the graduate degree is from University of Houston, and it is for 7 different quarters.
So it's a part-time.
Yeah, she took 2 or 3 courses in each quarter.
Okay. That's just
And
basically a math.
Pardon me?
She doesn't have a four-year degree.
Okay.
I think that's clearly not acceptable.
Okay.
Maybe I'm getting too hard-nosed.
No, the undergraduate degree contributes nothing to, I don't think. It has some math and physics, but contributes nothing to it. But the courses that were taken were.
You can move to deny it based on a lack of qualifying engineering degree, and then she can respond if.
Yeah, I'll change my motion to exactly that, Tony.
So.
And I'll second it.
And John, second, deny Cassandra Moody due to a lack of qualifying undergraduate degree. Is that correct?
Yes.
All those in favor of the motion to deny Cassandra Moody due to a lack of qualifying undergraduate degree, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Okay, I'm going to the bottom of the list for Brandon Rexford. He has a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from University of Maine, and a Master's in Project Management from Northeastern. And I'm going to make the same motion. I don't think that's equivalent to a 4-year engineering degree. There's absolutely no design work or anything.
No design, right. So the motion is to deny based on a lack of a qualifying undergraduate engineering curriculum degree.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah.
It wasn't an accredited degree, I take it, an engineering accredited degree?
No, he said non-model law.
Okay, thank you.
What was the second? The master's was in what?
Master's in Project Management.
Right. Okay. Okay, so the motion is to deny based on the lack of a qualifying engineering degree, non-model law. So all those in favor of the motion to deny?
What, a second it? Was it a second it?
John DeWolf seconded.
Okay.
I don't remember. Okay.
I heard a mumble from that, and your screen lit up, so I don't know what you
All
were
right,
saying.
so, okay, as long as somebody seconded so that we don't screw it up.
Let's do it again. It's been moved to deny based on the lack of a qualifying engineering degree. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion to deny Brandon Rexford due to the lack of a qualifying engineering degree, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
And for Moran through Ramirez, I'll make a motion to approve all 9 of them, I guess.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Thank you, Al. You've been quiet today, Al.
Yes.
Well,
All in favor of the motion to approve Class 4 reciprocity for Moran through Ramirez on page 5 of our regular agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Tony, I think Al needs to spell out his name. I look at his label as an AI guest.
Which one?
So I don't even know if he's at the meeting.
Oh, AI guest. Yeah. It's just a hologram. Shows you how up to date I was. I was watching the NFL thing, when Tom Brady was off to the side. I said, my eye's out of focus. I said, that thing looks like a hologram. And my son said, it is a hologram. He's not there. Anyway, I got to get up to speed. At least I knew it wasn't, live. Okay. Brian Thompson reviewed the next group of applicants for Class 4 reciprocity, Sanders through Zastrow on page 6.
All right. So I'm going to start with Trujillo, Connor Trujillo. I'm just curious. He's the only one of the group that's not listed as model law, and I don't know why. So I want to make sure I'm not missing something. So that's why I'm not just going to say approve him. I think he should be approved, but there may be something I'm missing. So he's passed the fundamentals exam, passed the principles and practice exam. He has 5 good references. He's got 10 years experience, 10 and a half years experience. His degree it says bachelor's in engineering from Stanford University. That's a little odd, but then I look at the transcript and it says degree, bachelor's of science, plan engineering, program, engineering BS. He's got, I looked through what year was this?
Yeah.
His degree was awarded. Where does it say when his degree was awarded?
Every once in a while, it comes up that it wasn't accredited at the time that he graduated, or the program. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I get that. Degree was awarded in 2008. But Stanford, I can't imagine Stanford not being accredited. I don't know. I mean,
What is the degree in?
it says Bachelor of Science and then plan, and then down under it says plan. Engineering. Oh, I'm sorry. It was conferred in 2011. I looked at the wrong thing. So conferred 2011, plan engineering, subplan, atmosphere and energy. And it's obviously it's an environmental degree, very clearly environmental, based on all the class work. And it looks like that's the kind of work that he's in.
I just looked up ABET, and they only have 2 degrees that are accredited, civil and mechanical, for Stanford University.
Okay, well, that's probably the reason then, right there. Interesting. So I guess in that case, then I would have to. I don't know. I want to hear what John says. But I would think that if it's not accredited, then it's a no-go.
It could be a science degree more than an engineering degree. That's what the concern I would have.
Yeah. Let me just
evaluated.
Yeah, maybe we can have you evaluated, but I'd like to just read off a couple of the courses. There's chemical principles. There's integral calculus of several variables. There's ordinary differential equations with linear algebra. There's energy technologies for a sustainable future,
But
linear algebra.
but no soils and no mechanics and.
Yeah, maybe that's the issue. Well, I'm just looking at the first year. Then there's air pollution, mechanics. There's environmental science and technology, renewable energy, dynamic earth. Yeah, maybe that's the issue. Maybe it's more of a science degree. Statistical methods, introductory electronics, engineering, economics. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's a little light, but I'm not really familiar with environmental degrees, so I'm not sure what they typically do and don't cover. Yeah, I guess for him, then we should have him evaluate the degree.
Okay, so the motion,
I just need to interrupt quickly. So he should, he did have it evaluated. You don't have it, Ryan, as part of his record?
I don't think I do. No. Let me
Okay,
just
because
check,
it
make sure.
says he has no deficiencies.
I don't see an evaluation form in this, so I didn't get that.
Okay, I can quickly send it to you.
Okay. But I guess that still begs the question. Well, yeah, once I get it, let me take a look. Did you send it yet?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
if there's an environmental engineering curriculum, and that's the basis for the exam module, that gets a little confusing now.
I mean, it says engineering. It's not like it says it's a science degree or environmental science or anything. It says engineering on the transcript. Which is a little odd. Like I would think it normally would say environmental engineering or something, but it doesn't.
So just my 2 cents. So say he was applying for the exam, wouldn't he be considered under class 2, where he would just be required more years of experience?
If he has an engineering degree, I would keep him in where he is. If it's been evaluated and it's equivalent to an engineering degree, then we should be okay.
Yeah, so she just sent it. I'm looking at opening it up now.
I mean, I'm willing to accept Jane stating that.
I mean, the equivalent, it does say equivalent. It says 49 engineering hours, 34 math science hours.
Okay. It's okay.
Yeah. So, okay, then in that case, then I recommend approval of all of them.
All right, so moved by Ryan, second by John DeWolf.
Yep. Okay.
For approval from Sanders through Zastro. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That completes page 6. On page 7, we had notice of several applicants for class 9 license. So is there a motion to approve Abram through Zhang for license as EIT?
So moved.
John?
No.
No, who said that?
Rich.
Richard, who's second, please?
I'll second.
Oh,
All those in favor of the motion to approve Abram through Zhang for class 9 license, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. John DeWolf reviewed Felipe Azevedo Paulo and Mohammed Raji for class 10 license.
okay. The first one is everything is equivalent except missing 2 hours of general education. The second one is missing 6 hours of general education, but they're otherwise okay. The only thing I would say about the second one, Mr. Rajiv, if I'm saying it correctly, is that he could be approved for class 1 credit part 1. But anyway, I recommend approval for both for class 10 license.
Okay. Second,
Second.
thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion to approve Azevedo Paulo and Rajiv for Class 10 license, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. Which moves us to reinstatement for Michael A. Hoover and Kelly A. Streeter, reviewed by Bob Doan. So
I make a motion to approve both Hoover and Streeter for reinstatement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Al. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. Which brings us to our supplemental agenda. The first item on the supplemental agenda was credit part 1. For Brian Williams, reviewed by John DeWolf.
Okay. Yeah, his experience record has been corrected, so I move approval for Class 1, Credit Part 1.
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. And John, you also reviewed Class 1 exam credit part 1 for Brendan Richardson on page 2 of our supplemental.
And I recommend approval.
I'll second.
Thank you, Al. All those in favor of the motion to approve Brendan Richardson for Class 1 exam credit part 1, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. Bob Doan reviewed Adams to De Velasco on page 2 of our supplemental for Class 4 reciprocity.
I'll make a motion to approve Adams, Barman, Cousins, and De Velasco for Class 4 license.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion to approve Adams to De Velasco, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. Rob Lewandowski made a thorough review of the next applicants, Grau, Gruffy, Hagi, and Hollis. His comments are, they were all 4 applications on the supplemental are all model law engineers, good degrees, great experience, good applications, well done, and therefore he recommends approval. Is there a motion to accept his recommendation?
So moved.
Thank you, Richard.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of the motion to approve Grau through Harless, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. And Richard Swizak reviewed Early, Guzikowski, Miller, and Motor for Class 4 reciprocity.
I'll make a motion that we accept all 4 applications. Mr. Miller had the old-fashioned application, but has 30 years plus experience, 36 years plus experience. So I'll make a motion that we approve all 4 applicants.
He's probably been filling out that application for 30 of those years.
I don't know. Well, it's funny because he runs his own firm, but he's not NCWS. And it's like, come on, get with it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Put it out. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion to approve Hurley and through Motor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. And the last 3 on that supplemental agenda for Class 4 reciprocity are Rhodes, Riggs, and Ziegler, reviewed by Ryan Thompson.
Yeah, all 3 are model law and good, everything. I recommend approval.
Bless you.
Second?
Second.
Thanks, Richard. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Now, one of the interesting things about our two agendas is that I got left off the agenda completely. Not on the first one or the second one. So I reviewed how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I reviewed 10 applicants. It went from Hubbas, Allen, Amadeo, Anderson, another Anderson, Backlund, Barber, Usonio, Brandau, and Brown. All but one, Eduardo Barber, were model law engineers with great experience and current licenses. Eduardo had a very good evaluation with 2 degrees from Milan, practicing in California, doing mostly civil work. So my motion is to accept Abbas through Barber and Bisogno through Brown on my agenda summary for class 4 reciprocity.
Didn't
So,
John
Tony-
review these
Yeah, so remember, you didn't get
on
the
page 4?
yeah, you didn't get the application, so I asked John to review them. And I sent
Oh,
them to
we've
him
already
because you
done-
hadn't gotten the packet.
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, that's what, they've already been approved.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
that was Beck.
oh, there we go. I didn't recognize the names, but I see it now. Okay, well, very good, because I had pulled away Mr. Kevin Beck. That's what I was surprised about. Okay, very good. Well, you've already done it.
Yeah, when you said 2 degrees from Milan, I knew that was the one I did
Oh,
for
there
you.
you go. All right, well, I got them all reviewed anyway, and it was a long night, but that was it. So I think that concludes our actually, with all due respect to Terry McCarthy, Terry, that was the longest meeting we've had in a long time, but productive.
Yes.
I think it's time for Al.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Al.
Okay, everybody have a happy holiday.
Yeah,
you.
happy holidays,
Thanksgiving and
everyone.
Christmas. And
All those in
Jane, I'm
favor-
gonna be in Colorado in January, so you'll have to send me electronic applications.
Okay. Don't
Will
break
do.
it.
Does it work the way, Richard, does it work the way you guys are okay with it getting the folder? And
Yeah,
opening
and I mean, as
folder?
long as I don't need a password or a clearance, because, I can, download something like that. But, as soon as I need some kind of a security clearance, it screws it up.
Because my problem with emailing them, they get kicked back if there's like if I don't catch the social security number. So I try to black them out, but sometimes I miss it and then they get kicked back and it's just frustrating. So that's why my IT suggested I send the folders. So if you
That's
guys
fine.
are okay with the folders.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we can open them.
I gotta be honest, I would prefer to get it electronically and not get the I've said that before. I know everybody else likes the packets, but I would prefer to get all of mine electronically.
Ryan, I will send you them electronically.
Okay.
I like the paper because I can flip back and forth more readily, but I can do it electronically too. And the way you sent them, Jane, just the other day was fine with me, where I had to then put in my email and then get a clearance with a number.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I won't be here at the January 7th meeting. We will be out of the country.
Okay, John, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. It was a good day. All right, thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
so long.
Okay.